Is it recording?
Yeah, it's recording.
Awesome. Here we are on The Blind Man in Black. And I'm really honored and immensely grateful to have educator, social justice activists, and we were former suite mates at the SIT Graduate Institute. Derek Johnson, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So how are you holding up through all this shit, the pandemic and life and everything?
Well, you know what? I know that like the pandemic is real, and I most recently got vaccinated, which, you know, if that comes up, we can chat and talk about it, because I was one of those people who was resistant and then decided to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it was last year, 2020 was a growing space for me. Like, I feel like the pandemic was real and all that was happening in the streets was real, but I feel like it was a growth year for me. So I'm holding up pretty well.
So how would you say that you've grown through the pandemic?
Well, you know, like, I think the pandemic gave me a lot of time to think about how I wanted to show up in the world and how I wasn't showing up. As it relates to like my work and my personal life, and I had a lot of time to think about it. There was a lot of transition in my life during the pandemic, because I was one of the people who, you know, lost their job and
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, was unemployed for a while, and also was going through like divorcing.
Holy shit.
Yeah, you know, like, and then coming to terms with, like, you know, just things in general, all of that, and then making the decision to move back to Vermont. I actually went back to Vermont around last March, and I just moved back here to the DC area where I'm currently living last month, February. So I was in Vermont from March of last year to February of this year, kind of just reconnecting to myself, reconnecting to community, and all that was a positive, you know, outside of like all the reality of people dying and life being restricted. There was still some great stuff that happened for me.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like it was heavy, but it turned out well.
Yeah.
So do you mind talking about your decision about the vaccine? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, you know, I was living in Vermont and the numbers were very low. And so I was potting, you know, in a pod per se, and working from home, so not coming in contact with anyone. And then my job reopened schools. And so I was working remotely up until that point. And I had to return back here to DC because I work, you know, in the education system. And when we were called back into the space, it was like, there were cases of COVID. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be around people who potentially, you know, there's been more cases of COVID in this area, and people are dying from it. And I don't want to be one of those people. And I also wanted to be able to maintain community. And so I decided to take the vaccination. But I was hesitant because there's a lot of historical, you know, just historical trauma around vaccinations and trusting the government. And I just figured, I know that's true and I can hold that, but also know that it seems like it's something that I should be doing for myself, and also ensuring that I'm not going to be the carrier or affecting someone else. So, and then also, I'm one of the people who like love to travel. Traveling is like my jam. It's what I do. It's how I connect in the world. And knowing that taking the vaccination would also maybe provide me opportunity to be able to do that, I made a decision to take the vaccination.
Thank you. Hey, I didn't ask you. So I usually do this, but am I centered in the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. And and you're illuminated and everything looks good on your end?
Yep. Like,
okay, great. So the reason I asked you to allow me to interview you is because I felt like, you know, I met you at the SIT Graduate Institute in Vermont, and we were suite mates, and we didn't have a lot of contact I think maybe Melissa, who was in your class.
Yeah.
I think early on, she introduced us, and I think we talked about the fact that I was in the porn industry, and I wrote Pirates 1 and Pirates 2, Stagnetti's Revenge, and I feel like we watched a little bit of it, and I like,
did.
I don't remember if we did or not. So we did.
I remember Melissa coming over and us having like movie nights in the little lounge. So maybe we did, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but at least we talked about it. I remember that at the least. And then, but I really enjoyed being around you, but we didn't have an opportunity to talk much. And then I feel like I started to really understand, that we had kind of a like-mindedness and in terms of social justice, racial justice, climate justice. And I was like, I wish we would have, had more opportunities to talk. And anyway, I just want to learn more about you and how you became the person that you are.
Sure. Okay, we can do that. I don't mind talking about my background because I feel like it helps me really clarify what it is that I'm trying to do and why I'm doing it in the world. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we can talk about that. What do you want to know?
Yeah, like what are some of the early moments in your life or influences that formed who you are? Like, are you from DC?
So I'm not from DC. I'm from a small town on the eastern shore of Maryland called Salisbury, Maryland. I was born in the small state of Delaware, in a rural community.
What was that experience like?
So it's a mixed bag, right? Because growing up, I remember there being close family connection and all things being really well and good, especially, like younger childhood memories and things like that. Fishing and camping and, having family dinners and all that good stuff. And education being very important and going to school and making something out of yourself. And my families come from a small enough town where they had some influence and connection. But I remember when we moved out of Delaware into Salisbury, and my father was addicted to drugs, right? So, and I didn't know that right away. That wasn't like something that I knew right away. So that kind of changed our life. Like my parents were like married and had a home, and then he was addicted to drugs, and that's
what did your parents do for a living?
So at the time, my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad worked in like factory work, and he was always like kind of like a hustler, and a farmer. So he kind of had his hands in that. So he was like all over the place. But he had an addiction and I learned later that it was something that he really struggled with from when he was like high school moving forward. Anyway, that spiraled into an addiction that got out of control and then landed him in prison. And so like my mother had to go from like stay-at-home mom to like working in a poultry factory, and then deciding that wasn't what she wanted to do. And so she put herself through community college and undergrad and got her master's. And now she's, a licensed social worker and therapist. And so I saw all of that. And so I think that's like where my drive came from, as far as like wanting to like do something in the world, but I didn't know what that was going to be. Right. But I also appreciated how even through all of that, she always provided space for us to like speak our mind and give us a voice, like allow us to have our voice. We have one, you're a child, yeah, but you still have a voice. And I recall sitting around, like, especially my mother's family at dinners, like Sunday dinner or holiday dinners, there was always discussion about politics or about just like life stuff in general, right? These theoretical conversations were happening and everybody got to participate. And so that's like when I really started to like deeply dive into like, oh, some things about the world aren't right and we need to do something about it. And I remember in high school, joining up with these group of kids because we staged a protest because they wanted to like cut off the arts program at our school. And that was like my first like social kind of like act of resistance. And that just kind of led the way through my life. That's how it's kind of been, like trying to combine education, trying to connect different people, looking at the world through a lens of some things just are not right and we need to do something about them. But not really having like the words and all of that. And I think that came later. Like in, not undergrad, actually at SIT. SIT kind of helped me like really put into perspective what I wanted to do in the world. Because I came to SIT after living in South Korea, teaching English. And my whole plan was to come back and gain certification and knowledge so I could go back abroad and teach English. And, you know, and like make some money and whatever. And in my time at SIT, I was just like, the stuff that they're teaching us, they're telling us that English is going to be the way to like solve every person's problem. Like, this is the way we're going to lift people out of the world, out of poverty. And this is what's going to make everything better. And I just wasn't buying it. And it didn't sound right. And it just didn't make sense.
Sounded like bullshit. Yeah.
It sounded like bullshit. And then when I went to Costa Rica on internship and got to meet people who were like awesome teachers, but they were looking towards me, a grad student with no real teacher experience, to tell them how they could better teach English to their students. And I was like, where does that happen? Why am I the more knowledgeable other? And these people are like, they don't have the degrees, but they have experience and they're in the classroom every day. And I've just gone through this little program and now I'm coming to tell these people that English is going to be the way for them. And it didn't work. And then when I came back and I started to do like my projects and write papers around it and show movies to my colleagues, there was this huge pushback, like from the administrators and from my colleagues. And
so you were kind of doing an anti-thesis to some degree.
Yeah. And people they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to buy it. And so anyway, after SIT, I was like, no, I can't go forward with that plan. So I ended up staying in Vermont and going through the program at Marlboro, the Social Justice Education Spark program. And through there, I got the language and the words, and you know, started to like dig deeply and understood that, you know, capitalism is a real thing that is degrading our world, and white supremacy is a real thing, and patriarchy is a real thing. And we are awash with it. I'm awash with it. And I have to do the work daily. And the best place to do the work daily is with kids, because kids are change makers. And if they are able to like look at the world and see that something is not the way it should be, then they will have the skills to call it out and change it. And so that's why I decided to go into elementary education.
Okay. I want to step back just a little bit and just kind of delve into a couple things. Now, how old were you when your father went to prison?
I was 12.
And how did that affect you?
I think it was 12. Maybe I was 10. It had a big effect. Because you know how you have like, before his time leading up to prison, it wasn't great. And I can still recall like incidences of domestic violence and, you know, him not being the person that I know him to be, and had experienced him before, and now experience him now that he's like, you know, clean and sober and living his life and everything.
So you have a relationship with him now?
Yeah.
Okay.
But before that, it was having to really be very aware. I think that's what kind of affected being aware about what other people are feeling or thinking, and doing their thinking for them almost, so that you can kind of keep yourself safe. If that makes sense. And so some people would call that, I've been hearing people say like, oh, I'm an empath. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but that's also sometimes because you have to be, because you're trying to protect yourself and others around you. And so you have to kind of like clue into what people's vibes are.
Mm-hmm.
And that shit could be very, oh, can I curse? I'm sorry.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
That shit can be exhausting.
Yeah.
And it also affects adult relationships
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't aware of, that I was carrying all of that with me. But I think that what it did do for me in many ways was that it was a drive to not be that way. That kind of was like, it could be heavy at times. Like, oh, I'm never gonna, put myself in a situation where I'm gonna like, become addicted to drugs, or I'm never gonna go out and, and commit a crime. I don't want the police looking at me, that kind of thing. I want to be the one who does all these great things. And sometimes it was exhausting and heavy, and other times it was like what propelled me to do what I wanted to do, because I wanted to not be that way, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, was that kind of like, going through life, you're like, if you had an opportunity to like use or something like that, it was like, how did that make you feel? Where you're like, I don't know if I should do this. Am I gonna, what did that?
Yeah, like,
because I used to use Coke and and stuff like that. And I didn't really think about the consequences. I just did it. But
I think for me, like, yeah, I think I put boundaries. So like I would never utilize cocaine. My father was addicted to cocaine, and then that spiraled into crack, right? And I was having like, and friends would be like, oh yeah, we're gonna be out at a party in DC, and someone does a line, and I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
But if we were smoking a bowl or rolling up, or I'd be fine with marijuana. I was fine with that.
Right.
I think that I tended to not, and drinking was a thing, like it's been a thing.
Right.
So that was like a thing. And then, yeah, I have conversations with people all the time around like addiction, because my idea and my understanding of addiction now is different than when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a ways we're kind of all addicted to things, and we use them, and it happens. But I also think it's very biological, but I don't know if it's something that's passed on. I don't think that is the case. I think that it's just one of those things that we all get sensations from things, and sometimes it becomes over-consuming and we don't know how to deal with it. And that's when it spirals, because it's affecting your life so much. I think that we all kind of low-key are addicted to lots of things.
Say that last part one more time.
I said, I think low-key we're all addicted to lots of things.
Yeah.
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 It's just the way things are set up.
Yeah, I mean, the system itself, capitalism, lends itself to escapism and also trying to kill the collective trauma that we're all experiencing.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the reason I use is to numb the pain or try to feel alive when I felt dead. But let's talk about, so you had that protest for the art program. What was the outcome of that?
We all got 1-day suspensions.
But did you save the program?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
But it did make the paper.
Oh, good.
It made the paper and made awareness. And I think that's what we, at the time, being 9th graders in high school, thought like, okay, we're doing something. This is not fair.
Mm-hmm.
And what can we do about it? We can protest, and we can stage a walkout, and everybody got like a 1-day in-school suspension. Some people got sent home. I think I was one of the people who got sent home. Yeah, but it was one of those things like, I know that this is possible, this works. And I think that also relies heavily upon, I knew that because of, like I said, having those conversations at home around the dinner table, and then also having some awesome educators who didn't attempt to whitewash history. And even in a small town, in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, that there was resistance, and that it's possible. And I think that that was something that my teachers kind of always made sure they taught, especially like my 6th grade social studies teacher, Miss Miles, and then my 9th and 10th grade teacher, Miss Durham. It's just like, yeah, we need to know the whole story.
So was there a moment, was there a time, because I know I was asleep for a long time, and I believe, bought into the American dream to some degree. And then, this George Carlin says it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it.
Yeah.
And was there a shift, or were you always kind of like cynical of it? Like,
I think I've always been cynical of the idea of the American dream because I've always been cynical of America or the USA, right? But I know for a fact there were parts of it that I held on to for a long time. And I think that it started to crumble for me at around 30. I'm 42 now. And I remember at my 30th birthday, like having like an early midlife crisis because I didn't feel like I was achieving all the things that you're supposed to achieve. And I had a lot of my peers from college and even from high school who were like married, they had children, they were in their first home. And I'm like living in DC in a studio apartment, having an awesome time, but like those things are like, oh, you're 30. And at that time also kind of like trying to work out my sexuality. And so it was like a whole thing. And that was like so unsettling that it was just like, why am I like getting myself so twisted up in this and trying to like have all these benchmarks and not really doing it for me, but doing it for others. And I think for a while after my 30th birthday, I started to kind of like relinquish that. And then we'll relinquish the idea of the American dream, or at least thought I did. And then when I came back and went to grad school and then came back from Vermont to DC, it was like, no, that stuff is still there trying to guide me, right? And so from, literally from the time I got back here, where you said 9 years ago, right along, a lot of that was spent still trying to commit to those ideas of the American, trying to hold two things at once and it not really panning out or working. And so now I'm kind of like on like I don't have to, if I never own a home, that's okay too. I don't have to be in a monogamous, committed, married relationship. I'm good. I'm good with how things are.
So let's talk about sexuality. When did you discover it? And like, when did you embrace it?
So I'm a curious person. And I recall like my mother, because my mother's a social worker, a licensed therapist, and she's sitting us down and like wanting to have the talk. But it was kind of like one of those, you should use condoms and you should wait. If you can, you should wait. But it was a very heteronormative conversation. And I mean, like most kids, male and female, your first experience most times are with same gendered. And so I had some like playing around, but it was nothing serious. It wasn't emotional. And through high school, I had a girlfriend. But it was after high school that I started to explore, like, I think I may be gay. Am I bisexual? Am I gay? Which one is it? I don't know. And so for a very long time, I just went the angle of I was gay because I felt my emotional and physical connection was more closely related to men. So I identified as a gay man, but I wasn't out. And I didn't share that with a lot of people, just my close friends, not even my family mostly. I told my mom and I told my dad, but that was it.
And how did they respond?
So my mom was like, I love you no matter what. I'm supportive. I didn't know, but I'm glad that you shared this with me, that you told me about it. My dad was a little bit more judgmental at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of put a little spur in our relationship for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but through that time of identifying as a gay man, I had these level of attraction to other people that sometimes I would explore and sometimes I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got back here to DC and I met this guy, and we fell in love, or we were in love. And so I was like, okay, now I really need to be like, I need to come out of the closet because, I'm professing my love for this person and I want my family to be involved, and etc. And so that's the route that I went, and that's what I did.
And now that was after SIT Graduate Institute?
That was after SIT.
Okay.
And we were together for almost 8 years. We were married for 2 years. Mm-hmm. But you asked earlier about the things that you bring in, like from your experiences and from your dad, and things like that. And I brought a lot of that into our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so did he. And we didn't work out. We didn't work. And we should have probably called it quits earlier than we did. Mm-hmm. But you're trying to maintain, we're about to have a house built. We were the couple, the ideal couple, and everybody was loving us. Our families knew one another. It was like a thing, like this is probably your forever person. That's what I thought.
Right.
And that didn't work. And then, so now I'm single again. And my thought was, okay, if I'm going to be single again, I have to be very clear about, for me, how I'm going to engage with people. Because I felt like when you're single, sometimes, I don't know, maybe this is for me, when you interact with people, you kind of, sometimes we make this thing like where they're the only one, but we know they're not the only one. And they kind of probably know they're not the only one as well, but you kind of do this whole monogamous thing, even though you're not being monogamous. And I always felt like before, like I had gotten married, that I was doing that. And I didn't feel right about it because I felt like I wasn't being honest with myself or with those people, because I'm kind of creating these false relationships that maybe may go nowhere, just so I can maintain interaction with that person. You know what I mean?
So are you polyamorous?
So I decided that I was going to be ethically non-monogamous.
Okay.
And what does that mean? That I'm going to let people know that they're not the only person that I'm seeing, and I'd be fine with them doing the same, and so whatever. And I would consider myself possibly polyamorous.
Okay.
Because I wasn't sure. And I also was like exploring like my attractions to other people. So it was like, okay, I'm not just attracted to men. I'm attracted to people. And so then I started to identify myself as a pansexual person.
Okay.
And that has fit for me. And over the time that I've been not newly single, I've formed, even during the pandemic, some relationships with, with various people, and well, 2 people in general. And I'm exploring what that looks like, and then being like, okay, yeah, I think I can hold, maybe I am polyamorous, but I don't know that I can I don't think polyamory is just all about going out and having sex with whomever, or like swinging. It's a part of it. It's how it shows up. But it's also about emotional connection. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of like being very vulnerable with yourself, and being able to say to someone like, this is what I'm doing, or this is what I'm feeling. What do you think about this? And, it's a lot, and I'm still learning it. But
so how have people responded when you're vulnerable and explain how you're feeling and your needs?
Well, I feel like I've met like I said, I've met two people that I've gotten to know over the past year that are very comfortable and open, and they, I guess they're a little bit more knowledgeable than me. And then I have my friend, you know, Lacey. Lacey is ethically non-monogamous and polyamorous, and so she's been kind of like my coach, and we kind of have check-ins and talk about it. I think that like I'm intentional about sharing it because I feel like, you know, just like right now and with others, because it's a part of me that I feel like I've probably denied for a very long time. And since I'm over denying like parts of me that I feel like are what make me pretty cool, I'm like, I want everybody to know, yeah, like polyamory is a thing. Pansexualism is a thing. Being pansexual is a thing. And it's not something just made up. You know, it's like, it's legit and it's real. And yeah, I'm glad. I'm just sorry that I waited so long to like figure that out about myself.
Now, how do you feel now that you're open about it and sharing?
It feels comforting because I feel like I'm acknowledging a part of myself that, as I said, it was probably I knew, but I boxed myself in because that's what we do. We box ourselves in sometimes because I don't know about you, but sometimes for me, I was more worried about what others were thinking or feeling about what I'm doing versus like what I'm actually doing for myself.
Right.
And now I don't have to do that anymore. So I feel it feels, you know, it feels good. It feels like I'm standing in the part of myself that I, you know, when you know yourself, you know things about yourself, and you can stand in them and not be like wavery about it. It feels good.
Yeah.
It feels like you got some kind of power back.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about education, because I had a similar experience when you were talking about when you went and taught abroad. I got my undergrad degree at Cal Arts, and then I got my master's in directing at UCLA. And when I finished UCLA, I was my plan was to just go into the, you know, just start directing. But my thesis, I was really unhappy with it, and I didn't invite anybody to my thesis production, and I was really depressed. And then I didn't want to teach because I'm like, I don't feel like I'm worthy of teaching. What am I going to teach? Like my failure at my, you know, I didn't know what to do, and so. I didn't teach, and then I ended up going into the adult film industry, and then after that, I had some kind of, you know, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something that brought peace to the world and less conflict, and so that's why I went to SIT, and initially I did intercultural service, leadership, and management. Then I transitioned into peace building and conflict transformation. And then when I got to SIT, I met Melissa, whom we both know, and it was in the teaching, the TESOL program. And so she started telling me immediately, like, all the problems that was going on at SIT. And so I know when we arrived, we were supposed to have a library that was gone, or no, a career center that was gone, a medical center, health center that was gone. And then there was like a third thing that was taken away, like right before we arrived. And she's like, we got to do something about this. And then we got on the student council and was trying to deal with all these problems and the political conflicts that were going on. And then finding out about all the, you know, like the fact that the board members had nothing to do with SIT, and they were all Harvard graduates, and they had some kind of connection, like financial connection to like they either had like hotels that students use, or not hotels, but apartments that students use abroad. So they were profiting from it. And like seeing all this shit that was corrupt. And then like there's all this thing. You remember the grounds of SIT were all green, and they had a sustainable development program, but there were no gardens and that kind of shit. It was just like manicured lawns, and it was just like there was a lot of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And so and then I met Gustavo Esteva, who became my mentor and really close friend. And then I started to really question education and what the fuck are we doing, with this education, or being programmed? And it's this Pavlovian thing, like the school bell is to get us trained, and I started to really reflect on the educational process and what education was. And then Gustavo, who wrote Escaping Education, co-wrote, and then, I just kind of had this massive shift. And then I went to Mexico, and I got all the way through my coursework. And then I just started to really like think about SIT and that experience. And I was so fucking unhappy and depressed. And then I found out when I was down there that they owed Gustavo like $60,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That they did not pay him. And I was like, what the fuck? I said, that's it. That was like it. I'm like, I'm not finishing my degree. I say, fuck it. I'm done. Fuck education. And I'm done. So I want to talk about how, like, because I feel like you have similar, and maybe I'm wrong, you have similar feelings, but I want to know because I feel like you have a strong connection to education. I want to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, I didn't know that about with Gustavo and SIT, but I could imagine it. I think for me, like, I know the purpose of education is to institutionalize the institutions within members of society so that that society functions in the way that the institutions and superstructures want it to function. Mm-hmm. And education is that way, the method of doing that. And in knowing that, they're also like, so I'm never confused about that when I'm like teaching, because especially in this time and frame when it's around like teaching to the test and those types of things. And then the other part of it is that it's also, for me, I've always known it as being something that is also, it's a way of, the importance of reading and writing and being able to put your thoughts and being able to analyze what someone else has put into words and thoughts is a tool and a system that can be used to like challenge institutions and structures. Mm-hmm. And because that's collectively been how people who have been denied access to reading and writing, once given the ability to do it and not be condemned for it, it's an awesome thing. It's an awesome way of like making change. And so it's kind of like even as me as a teacher, it's a love-hate kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I love going into the classroom and working with my elementary school students. And then I also despise teacher talk and testing and looking at kids always at a deficit, and always trying to force down our throat that there is a one way of writing or speaking. Yeah, so it's a love-hate. I love it, but I get so exhausted by it and the pressures of it. And so, yeah, that led me at one point, like briefly, I left teaching because it was so exhausting. And because teachers, especially teachers now, like teachers are really out here like on their grind, but we are always looked at as like being the issue, the problem. Like for society's issues, teachers are like, we're like, oh, we're, like this whole thing with COVID, teachers demanding like safe space and being healthy and reimagining education. And then we're pitted against families and saying that we don't care about kids. And, like it's the politics of education.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially now, I have a 5-year-old stepson, and, he's trying to do the remote learning, and it's disastrous. And I'm, we're worried, about the socialization aspect of it, and all that shit, but I want to kind of talk about what, I get it. Like, I get that idea of the hate-love relationship, because I have, people like Gustavo is a perfect example. Like, I wouldn't have met him had I not gone the SIT.
Right.
So like, it's an odd kind of thing, it's a catch-22. And I've had so many wonderful experiences, going to Cal Arts, UCLA, and SIT. And, but I also, wonder, like, what would life have been like had I just pursued what I loved, and then, rather than spending all that time in the classroom. But what are some of the experiences, the connections that you've had with students, or those profound moments that made you love teaching?
I think it's like, as I said, I'm an elementary educator, but I also from time to time do some adult teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, what it is for me is that I said this before, but I know that every generation has an impact on, on the world. Whatever they're going to do, they're going to have some impact. And I think when you are in a classroom with a lot of young people, they just have this zest for life. They also are very honest,
mm-hmm.
and they have figured out their thoughts, even though we feel like they haven't figured out their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
They can identify, in their own, if given the opportunity, they will set aside what they've been taught at home and kind of let out what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
People don't believe that about children, but children know a lot because they're just around, right? And they listen and they have opinions and they think about things and they talk about them amongst themselves. And knowing that that is happening. And if you think about back as if you were, when you were a kid, like we were doing that too, until someone said, no, think this way.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to give to them like additional tools that will help them further what they're already doing, and knowing that they're going to do it because they already know, like, these things aren't fair. I remember like when, Dunk became president and the whole thing, I was working in a community school here in the DC area, and predominantly my students were all immigrants, migrants from various African and Latinx countries. And they were coming into the classroom like scared, because they didn't know if they were going to be deported, if they were going to be sent home. They knew their family members were being, watched and surveilled. And they came into the classroom, and yeah, you got to hold the space because there's a lot of that stuff is causing them a lot of stress and trauma. But they also were like, this is not fair. We should do something about this. What can we do about this? Mm-hmm. And for me, that's the perfect gateway into, well, let me tell you about what they did in 1887 and let me tell you about what happened here, so that you can see yourself how you feel other people felt that way, and this is what they did, and so now you can take that and do it too. And by the way, because you are children of color, there's a way that we're going to have to say it and do it, because this is the world in which we exist. We have a voice, and we can utilize our voice, and we can stand together with our voice. But also, these are the tools that you're going to need. You're going to need to know how to write a persuasive essay, because that's just what you got to be able to do. Because somebody out here said that's the measurement of you learning. So let's show them that that's what we can do, but we're going to do it with our voice. And I think for me, that's the passion of education. And also, the schoolhouse is really the community space. And I wish that more schools would become that way, where we are like providing food or ways of getting food. We are not like, it's not charity, it's like, it's solidarity. Like, it's all of these things that should be happening here, and we should be able to use this space. And so I've been very lucky to be at schools here in this area that have provided opportunities for that, and administrators who, maybe they're not all the way on board, but they trust you enough to be like, okay, this is the stuff that we can be doing, and it's because it's helping our students, and maybe it's making them look good, but we're providing things that the community needs through this space called school.
How is, I'm hearing a lot now, like when we were going to school in elementary school, the supplies were given to the teachers. Now I'm hearing a lot about teachers are having to buy supplies. Are you experiencing that where you have to buy a lot, just to keep the class functioning?
I refuse to do it, but I know a lot of teachers who do. I try to always work at a low res kind of teaching where we don't need a lot of materials. But yeah, that is a thing. Like teachers are literally, they're buying their school supplies. They're buying their kids coats when they need them if they're in a cold climate. They're buying shoes, they're bringing food to school, like, because these are all things that, our government should be doing.
Right.
Like literally, Brian, I don't know if you heard this case. There was a principal, I think it was in some southern state. He was working his 40-hour work week at school. And then at night, 3 or 4 days a week, going and working in some big box retail store, so that he could earn another salary so that he could help students who needed like support and their families who needed support. He was taking that whole check that he was working his overnight job to provide to his students. And the radio was spinning this like it was like some great thing. And I'm like
this is what all teachers should be doing, is what they were.
Like,
yeah,
no, hell no. Like this, first of all,
it's fucked up.
It's not a good thing that this man is sacrificing his life and his self and his family to help others when our school should be doing that. All the money that you're paying for textbooks that we don't really need, or all the money that you're paying for this or that to big textbooks companies. Like that money could be going to supplying the things so this one person doesn't have to do it. But that's the world we live in. If one person is considered a hero, then we just need more heroes to go out and fix the ilks of what capitalism is creating for us, and they get a gold star. And so if you want a gold star teacher, other educators, you do that too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not participating in the system that way, because you're, first of all, I'm selling you my labor, my time and energy, right?
Yeah.
And now you're making me pay for school supplies. Like I have to, like most people now working from home, using my personal laptop, using my personal electricity, using my cable to get internet, using my cell phone, and you're telling me there's budget cuts. So where's all where's all the money going? Where's it going to? Like
charter schools, right?
Yeah, they're definitely a thing too. They're definitely a thing. I just don't have any love for the charter school system.
Right.
I just think that there's been no proof that the charter school system has done anything for public education or increased standards or whatever method of they're waging or gauging student success. In urban or rural areas, charter schools have not done what they've said they were going to do, but they've taken a lot of money and made a lot. It's a business.
Yeah,
it's a business.
Right. Yeah, it's sad, that teachers have to work second jobs to to do what you mentioned, or just to maintain a living. I mean, and it seems like it just the inequality is getting worse and worse and worse. And I imagine it's just causing more burnout and frustration. And, it's something's got to give, something is going to give, I think, in the not too distant future.
I would agree. I mean, I don't feel like anyone should have to work a second job. Like, why are people working 2 or 3 jobs? Like, and then, as an educator, like you're working, like it's a lot of guilt. Teachers are guilted. Educators are guilted into a lot of things. because the spin is, if you're doing this, you're not putting the kids first. And so that's really what the mentality of what we have to change is, that whole idea of guilt. Because people who go into helping in industries like teaching or like social work or any other thing where you're helping someone, or working with another person and trying to, you do it for a reason. And I think I don't like to typecast or say that we, like certain people are a certain way, but you are doing it for a reason. The reason it could be because you want to, in quotes, help people, and that's what you do, and so you're committed to it. Whatever the reason, I think that the system understands that, and so they use it anytime. Yeah,
and I feel like it's setting teachers up to fail, and so that they can, take over the private, through the charter schools, and then it seems like, especially public schools and so on. But yeah, it's sad, and it just seemed it's so different. I mean, we're the same age, and so I think about growing up that I didn't see the stress on the teachers as much. You know what I mean? Like now it just seems like it's the anxiety and stress of just trying to function in a classroom now has become just overwhelming.
Yeah, I think really for me, I think to pinpoint it, it probably have started to happen earlier than this, but definitely the Clinton and second Bush years, this whole shift and change, the Common Core system, the federal government, like having these standards and states having standards for what effective teaching and education look like, and not leaving it up to, schools and teachers to decide that. And then the outcrop of, commercializing education by charter schools and giving and utilizing standardized testing to determine what success looked like. That, I think, is what really caused the decline of public education and the loss. And I would say, lastly, the loss of confidence or lack of confidence in unions, teacher unions.
Right.
Yeah, has set us on a trajectory of, public education not being a thing anymore.
Yeah. And it was like slowly stripped away. At first was the music programs, the art programs, and then, everything, it just became about math and science, and it's fucked up. So let's talk about, a lot has happened, how are you dealing and how are you resisting, like right now? Like, since the Trump administration, and of course it's been going on way before that. It's been, I think Naomi Klein really puts it well, as like every president has led up to Trump. And I think that's really true. It's every previous president reinforced the policies and laws that we're now experiencing, and Trump is just a symptom of the sickness of capitalism. And how have you been dealing with everything that's been happening?
Well, politically? You know what? The first thing I had to do, since you mentioned that, was to understand that, like, Trump was the angry fascist. Right. And everybody else of that was the kinder, gentler fascist.
Right.
They were just doing it in a different way. Right. And I think once I understood that, it's just like, oh, okay. So yeah, it was despicable, the blatant, just kind of nonsense that was happening. I'll tell you, when Trump got elected, I was like, I knew it was going to happen, but I hadn't prepared myself for it.
Yeah.
And so that little level of dumbfoundedness was still kind of there. And I remember calling up my mom, like, I can't believe this shit. Like, what? This is where we still are? Like, this is where we're at?
Yeah.
Like, really, folks? People, this is where we are? This is what we going with? Okay,
Right.
let's go there, right?
Yeah.
But then when it just started to just like spiral, and the excuse after excuse after excuse, and I was just like, and then you become cynical because you're just like, yeah, what's going to be the topping on the cake that's going to get everybody to be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is dangerous. This is not what we should be doing right now.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't happening. And I think for me, it was like, that's when I was like, okay, I need to start like building community and learning different things and really pushing back. And so I did that like through my teaching and through like joining community garden and going to the streets when I needed to and protesting in the streets and, you know, stuff like that. Because I was like, this shit is about to get, you know, with the police violence and then the white supremacist groups like back on the rise. I was like, this shit is about to get crazy.
Yeah.
So, you know, when everything then Corona happened, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the same feeling I had of like, when is the resistance going to just take over, you know?
And I was just like, it's not. We're not ready. And I remember leading up to the election this past last year, and you know, watching, I knew he wasn't going to win. I knew he wasn't going to win. I was just like, people they're not that insane, but you know. But then I was watching after the next day, and the results came back, and he had gained so many more number of people who voted for him. And Juan Gonzalez on Democracy Now! Kind of like summed it up. Because, you know, there's a lot of talk in the media about, you know, people of color, Black people and Latinx people voting for Trump and women voting for Trump and all these groups voting for Trump. And Juan Gonzalez said something like, what we can no longer deny is that across the board in this country, there are a large number of people, Black, white, women, men, gay, straight, who are comfortable with imperialism, are comfortable with white supremacy. And so we cannot be surprised that Trump gained almost 1 million plus more votes, because those people also benefit from imperialism and white supremacy. And so the real work is, how do we get them, if at all, to understand that there is no real benefit for them in the long run and for all of us? And I was just like, that is it right there. Like,
yeah,
that is it. That's what the work has to be, because yeah, it's real. Like, it's real. Like, yeah, you can know everything. You can, but it's still like, if I'm benefiting from it, if I believe America should be the strongest nation in the world, because I want it to be the strongest nation, because I feel like I'm getting something when they're out destroying other countries and, you know, and environmental systems, then I'm going to support whoever's going to go out and do it, who's going to walk around with the big stick, you know? And then who was it? I think Teddy Roosevelt said, walk softly, but carry a big stick. I was like, yeah, you know, that's Trump. And people are okay with that.
Yeah. And it's also right. Isn't it like, it's not only being comfortable with imperialism and racism and so on and white supremacy, but it's also like, I think there's like a passive, like, comfort with consumerism. Just like, I don't know if I can live without these comforts, you know, and these escapisms, you know, like the shit that I use Netflix and try to escape at the end of the day, because shit sucks, you know, and, but you know, it's like, I think, isn't that part of it too? Just being comfortable with consumerism?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that, right, because imperialism and capitalism allows for that. And so if I'm wanting my big old Hummer, you know, I want anybody who's going to keep the gas prices all the way down. You know, that's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I mean, and it's just like, I don't know. So I'm just like, okay. Yeah. It was just, it was eye-opening for me.
Well, one of the things that I remember, and I can't remember if it was a conversation or if it was a Facebook post, but I remember you talking, I mean, and this is what Gustavo talks about, is like acts of, revolutionary acts. And I think even the small things, and I remember one time you were talking about making your own soap.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's wonderful. That's exactly the type of acts of resistance that need to be done, that the small acts, just one after another, will eventually accumulate. And I thought that was so beautiful. I don't remember how. I just remember you were talking about making your own soap.
Yeah, and you know what? It was out at first. It was out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because it was just like I'm a struggling grad student here. Like I came here thinking like, okay, I can give 1 year of like struggle if it's going to help in the long run, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like out of necessity, I can't really afford soap, but can I afford to make it? And then like doing the research and like meeting other people who are already doing it, and
Mm-hmm.
then being able to then do it and then share it. And then and like this whole idea of like, mutual aid, like that's what's like that's what's happening now. And I think that's happening everywhere. It's been going on, but now we have a name for it.
Yeah.
But they are revolutionary acts, like hell, getting up and breathing every day in itself is a revolutionary act.
Yeah.
And then deciding like how you're gonna, what you're gonna do, how you're gonna do it. But yeah, things like that, like coming together, and like I got into community gardening. My family, I come from a family of farmers. My uncle still owns a lot of land that he farms, and it was kind of something I was disconnected from. And it was something I remember doing with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and then up in Vermont, the second year, like growing a garden in our backyard, and then coming back to DC and like I still need to do this. And so finding the community garden and being a member of that and sharing in that, and then being able to have conversations with people about other things. So it's like finding ways to build community, and then building community, you do, yeah, there's a shift, there's a change. You can spend time talking about things that are happening, like this summer up in Vermont, in Springfield, Vermont, um, doing like outdoor movie nights to like discuss things that are happening in the world. Like, not like, I mean, not, they were interesting, but not fun movies, but like clips of things like, what's the guy's name? Anyway, talking about like just different things, like how we can work together. Why are we alienated from one another? What can we do to change that? Those kind of things. Yeah.
So what has it been like in the streets? What did you experience in the recent protest?
Well, a lot of mine was like up in Vermont, so a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And small town is different. I mean, I'm sure you remember Brattleboro. You remember downtown Brattleboro?
Yeah, yeah.
And Piney Park. And so it would be like out with banners, but like people, Vermont is predominantly white. And so there'd be some people who come through and honk their horn, and there'd be other people who are on their big pickup trucks and like through the middle of downtown speeding at 40 or 50 miles an hour because they're trying to drown out the chanting or the music.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of thing. And then it was just trying to let people know that we are here and we stand in solidarity with the movements and uprisings that are taking place throughout the country at the time. And that, only a small number of us have to gather. That's when Leo Leone, I don't know if you're familiar with the children's books author, he writes this book called Swimmy. And Swimmy is about this little fish who is a part of a bigger school of fish, but the bigger school of fish are being antagonized and bullied by, I think they're sharks.
Mm-hmm.
And Swimmy gets this idea that they are all going to swim in formation as a bigger fish. And if they do that, then they will be in solidarity with each other and run away the shark. And that's kind of what we were trying to do in the streets.
Right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Who is the author?
Leo Leone.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a great children's book author. He writes some, and he normally just uses animals. Like he has one that's with a mouse, and it's great artwork too. Probably your 5-year-old would really enjoy it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was just thinking I should get that for him. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, Brattleboro is a funny place. I remember we were driving, I think, from a lecture that Gustavo had, and I think it was we were watching. It was because of a film that we were watching somewhere, and I'm not sure why we left campus, but we left campus, and then I was riding with you, Lisi, and someone else, and we got pulled over
by Officer White Man. You remember that?
Yeah, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah,
and there was no reason for it at all.
No. Yeah. Well, it's still happening there. There was a big scandal with the police. I actually penned a letter with someone in the community around police violence, and because even in small town, the letter basically was like in Brattleboro, there was a police officer who, I can't remember his name right now, but he was, I don't know if he was arrested, but it was around domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And he had also been connected to a shooting of a unarmed Black man. They said they saw a gun, but no, it was never found in a hotel in Brattleboro some years before that. And we penned this article around police violence and why, even in a community where majority of the people are white, the policing system is used the same way. It's there to protect property, not people. And we went out into the streets one day there, and it's this quaint little town, but where I thought, when I was there for SIT, like this is like really hippy dippy, crunchy granola. Everybody's like, oh, we love everybody, we welcome everybody,
Yeah.
But now that SIT is closed down, and it was the era of Trump, and the streets are lined, every pole downtown is lined with an American flag, and like it's a whole different vibe. And I had a whole different experience with Vermont this time around.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, it was like, it's a different place. It's still crunchy granola and cool, but it's also still dealing with what we as a country are dealing with, which is
the polarization.
Polarization, and a lot of people in poverty and not knowing how to handle it and deal with it, and systems set up to maintain that structure. It's definitely different this time around.
So how did that make you feel? Where did that leave you?
At times it was tough, because I accepted a job in Vermont. Like I moved, like literally, I don't know if you remember Nick Awad.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So Nick and I went through, we met at SIT, but we also did the program through the Spark program. Mm-hmm. And so the second year in, we were roommates. And then from that, we became friends. Life happened, and a few of us would keep in touch. But anyway, we were on Zoom checking in, because everybody was Zooming in, house partying at the first part of the pandemic. And she was like, Derek, you should come to Vermont. I know, you can come here in quarantine and just stay, after your quarantine, stay like a week or two. And I was like, sure, Nick, I'll do that. And that turned into me moving there and accepting a job in Springfield as like a literacy coach, mm-hmm. For elementary school, and taking the job, and then realizing once I got there, oh, wait, I'm the first man of color outside of the custodian that this school district has ever hired. And there was a lot of stuff going on in the community, where there was a parent who was pushing back because a book was read called What Happened in Our Town, or something like that, about a town that experienced like a George Floyd type killing, and how the white family responded to it, how the Black family responded to it. And this police officer was like, this is propaganda, and you are telling my child that my profession is evil. And so the school board was going to decide that they were going to create a policy that would tell teachers what they could and could not teach. They'd have to get permission from like administration. And so that was going on. And there was a lot of microaggressions, racial microaggressions from administrators, the people who had hired me, not like colleagues. So my experience in Vermont was like, I was holding this container of, yes, I'm working with all these great people, and I'm back in community with friends, and I'm enjoying the hiking and the swimming and the maple syrup and the beer and, you know, all that great stuff. And then it's like, that's why I came here. I mean, I'm a Black man who grew up, in a small town, but then I grew up in DC, and I've seen different cultures around the world. And now I'm going to this place that I've been to before, but now I'm experiencing differently and not really feeling connected, not really feeling safe. Like, I don't know if you know this, but in Vermont, you don't need a license to carry a gun.
I did not know that.
I didn't know it either, Brian, until I was in the laundromat washing my clothes. And I was like, this guy has a holstered gun on. And I was like, okay, he's a little buff, a little fit. So maybe he's like off-duty police officers. They get to walk around with their guns out. Mm-hmm. But then I looked closer at the gun, and it was like a wooden-handled pistol. And then the next day, I saw this guy, and he was clearly looking like he was like a day laborer. You know, he hopped out of the van, his clothes were a little dusty, and he also had a holstered gun. And so I was like, okay, let me look up, like.
See, that seems like a New Hampshire thing.
Yeah, you would think, right?
Right, yeah.
No, it's a Vermont thing too. And I was like, and that kind of got a little weird, because I started to become a little concerned, because I was living in a small community in Bellows Falls. I was renting this house, and I'm this lone Black man. I got my Black Lives Matter sign on my lawn. And, you know, I decided to resign from my job in Springfield. And that got some media attention, local media attention. And so I did this interview, and then I'm like, oh my God, people can walk around with their guns, and I'm here by myself, you know? So like, that became a thing.
Now, did it make you go, okay, maybe I should have a gun?
It did in a moment. Yeah. It did in a moment. But I was like, no, that's the wrong way to be walking, because yeah, I could just imagine, what's good for the goose isn't always good for the gander. And then, so that could be, you have the right to carry a firearm, but, you know. And then it was also like, I could shoot myself or accidentally shoot somebody else. So when the opportunity came to like, okay, I need to find a new gig, I was able to find a new gig here in DC, but it was remote work. And then they called us back. So I was like, okay, I'm starting to not fall out of love with Vermont, but it's not being what it has been for me, which is the refuge, which is the place to like form and build community and be connected. And so I just decided, I'm gonna return back to work and come back to DC.
Do you feel like I think the Trump administration really did is, you know, embolden racist and white supremacy. So they're now being more open about it than they were, and proud of it. And so maybe, you know, it's obviously was always there. Yeah. But now it's become branded, so to speak. And like,
I do. I agree with that statement. I think that it's always been there. We've always known it. But because we had someone who was loud and boisterous and dumb, and got away with saying just about anything, it emboldened others. And I don't think we've seen the last of it at all. Just look at what happened yesterday down in Atlanta. Can
you share that with those that are listening and watching that don't know?
Sure. So yesterday in Atlanta, I think 8 brown women, they're Asian, were shot and killed. I don't know if they all died, so maybe not all 8, by a lone shooter who happened to be young and white. And in my opinion, the media is like always spinning it already because they're like, oh, he was addicted to sex. The police aren't saying if it was motivated by a race. I'm like, what the fuck else would it be motivated by? Like, and he got to live to tell about it. Just like the people at the Capitol who stormed it got to live to tell about it. And for me, I'm having, like, I saw a lot from last night to today about we need to stand up against Asian hate, stand against Asian hate, stand against Asian violence. And I'm just like, look, how about we just stand up against violence? How about we just stand up against saying white supremacy is not okay and that we as brown and black people can't be killed out in the streets? How about we just start there? We don't need to compartmentalize and have a campaign to stop particular violence against any group of people. It just needs to be stopping violence against people in general. Because for me, I've had this conversation a couple times today, is that I feel like it just continues, it's another tactic to continue to distance people of color and Black people and white people who stand in solidarity from one another by paying attention to, like, labeling that we need to stop, you know, a particular violence. No, we need to stop all of it.
Yeah.
Like, terrorism, domestic terrorism is real, and that's what's happening, and we just need to acknowledge that as a country and not try to, like, pit one group against the other. Because then those conversations start, well, where were you? You know, like, where were you when we were going through this, blah, blah, blah. No, like, come on, let's just see how we're collectively all suffering because of this.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I keep, I think, so many people are being, marginalized even more and driven into poverty. And I feel like, I'm seeing a rise in those without housing. And even in this rural community that I live in, Northern California, and the effects of it. And it makes me think of, Gandhi said, poverty is the worst form of violence. And it's really evident. And I maybe, I don't know. It just, I'm I think about that, maybe if I lost my job, and maybe I would act finally, maybe I'm not doing enough, to stop what this violence and racism and the exploitation and oppression. And it's I don't know what it's going to take to resist in a way that's effective to make real social change, not just the illusion of it.
Yeah.
I mean, are you feeling hopeful? How are you feeling?
I think that how can I say this? I think that, right, I agree with you. We are at a place where the material condition is just not at a place where we are all at a point where we're just like, oh, this can't happen anymore. Like, we're not there. Because clearly, like you were saying, in your rural community, even more here in DC, coming back here and driving past tent cities, and they're like right off the place where everybody's going. They're everybody sees them, but just the thoughts that we have about people who are living in poverty, it's their fault. They put themselves there. They didn't do enough. I'm struggling too, so how can I be concerned about them? All that. Like that's the stuff that we gotta, how do we extract that from our minds and the way that we interact? And then I think we would start to see a change. But I think that that is something that's difficult to do. And that's why, again, I go back to, that's why I consider myself a social justice educator, because those are the things that are foundationally how we treat, how we think about other people, and not just in this very liberal way about it, right? Like we gotta treat everybody nice, everybody has to be respected. Because what does all that look like? What does all that mean, really? Mm-hmm. We're talking about material, right? We know what that means emotionally and physically, or we can figure that out. But what does that mean about materially? Because we need things to subsist and live off and live on, right? Mm-hmm. And having those conversations with kids kind of sets the tone that they see that. And so hopefully it won't be a pattern that they repeat. Because I don't know, man. I don't know that in my lifetime or our lifetime, we're going to see some major foundational changes as it relates to structures. I think that because of the way the world is going around like the environment and stuff, I think that's going to cause some shifting about how we work together and how we get things done. But I don't know if it's going to be like a disruption to, we could re-envision the world. I remember reading this article at the start of the pandemic. It was by 2 college professors. And they were talking about how we don't need to go back to normal as it relates to education across the board. Like we need to like envision a new way of education because the shit is broken and we don't need to return back to normalcy. Mm-hmm. But enough people aren't thinking that way because everybody's like, this has been horrific and we just want to go back to where we weren't a lot of people weren't dying and we could go back out and enjoy our lives. And so we're not really focused on like the growth moment in a major way, I don't feel like.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that Gustavo and I have been discussing a lot is like, this could be a moment of real effective change, but it's hard to say right now. So where are you going from here? What is your plan?
Well, you know, for the most part, I take it day by day. Mm-hmm. I am working on a few things. Today was a jam-packed meeting day because I've aligned with 2 colleagues to do like some trainings around like migrant and immigrant justice work. So I'm doing that on the side. I'm teaching, of course. I'm working on myself personally, you know, like just trying to make sure that, I mean, it's a weird word, but aren't honoring myself and, you know, living life the way I want to choose to live it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's it. Like I'm trying to keep it real simple, but still doing a lot, you know, like, because it can become overwhelming. Everything can become overwhelming if you let it, right?
Yeah, I've been having panic attacks for weeks now. So it's been overwhelming for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, you know what? Sometimes like you're saying like, yeah, panic attacks or like you're just stressed. Like for me, last year or 2 years ago, it's been 2 years now, I was diagnosed with SAD, seasonal affective disorder, mm-hmm. and situational depression. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize I just thought, oh, winter's coming, I'm a little gloomy, mm-hmm. or if something happens, I stay in it for a while. I didn't have words for it. Mm-hmm. And from having that experience and like really like understanding that a part of me and, you know, the things that have caused that or things, you know, and how I can deal with it. From that learning is like, okay, I can just focus on what's happening right now and keeping myself in a place where I'm honoring myself. I'm setting boundaries that are going to work for me. I'm checking in with myself when shit is not good. it's all right if, you know, if I need a little cry or I need to be in a little space for a while. And then I can tell myself, okay, you've been in that for a little bit too long. What's happening? Let's address it so we can get back out and do what we need to do. And like being intentional like that is, and like I said, keeping things like simple.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a moment that in your life, or so you can, there's several moments, that you love beyond your fears?
I've loved beyond my fears. Yeah, I think that's what's been happening most recently for me. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I've been in and out of therapy for a lot of my adult life. Mm-hmm. I've made the decision to do it, and I think the most recently after my my separation from my ex, mm-hmm. I had to confront a lot of things that I think I thought that I confronted but had not. And I was doing some work with my therapist around having conversations with my inner child. And then for me, that was like growing up with my mom, you know, being who she is and what she does. I was just like, that's just some hooey-nooey kind of like, what are you talking about, inner child? Like, mm-hmm. like whatever. Yeah. But I think loving past my fears, like it was embracing that, yeah, that part of me is something that I carry with me all the time. And it guides a lot of my fears because that child, even though I had parents and a lot of people around me, it wasn't parented always the way it probably needed it to be, he needed to be. And so like my loving past my fear was like starting to have those conversations with myself, though it's, you know, this part of me that somehow, you know, because of the way life is, it experienced some levels of trauma. Mm-hmm. And being bold enough to be like, okay, yeah, Derek, this might, if you do this could help. Like, you don't have to, like, who's gonna know? Who's gonna know that you're having those conversations but you, right? Mm-hmm. And if it's beneficial, then why is that a fear? Mm-hmm. Or why is it a fear to like not be honest about what's happening right now with you? And I think that's when I did that, I mean, I started loving myself. Yeah. And not letting that kind of like, those fears guide me. And then not to say that it's over and done, because those things pop up, but now I know how to like have those conversations.
It's important. It's really important. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything, any projects or anything that you'd like to promote or talk about or anything that's coming up?
Sure. So again, I'm working on some trainings as far as it relates to immigrant migrant justice and dealing with what I call the three ugly heads of patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism. Mm-hmm. I'm also trying to shift into veganism.
Okay.
So, because when you met me, I was extremely overweight and I've lost a few pounds, a lot of pounds actually. I lost almost close to 100 pounds.
Congratulations.
And that's because of change of diet and change of like everything and just being very conscious about it. And so I'm trying to shift into veganism a little. I don't know if I'm going to make the whole jump. So I've been doing some projects around that.
You should talk to Vilma. That's her.
Oh yeah, I will. I'll send her a message.
Yeah. Yeah. She's been, I think I think she's her whole life pretty much has been vegan. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm doing this project called, it kind of puts my two passions together. It's called Black Vegan Noir. It's around, you know, traveling and dipping my toes into veganism. And so that's on Instagram. And I also do a couple of podcast radio shows with Indigo Radio, which is a part of Educational Practice. And it's in It's the station's in Vermont, but you can listen online. It's called Indigo Radio. It's every Sunday at 2. And then sometimes I do some hosting there. So
is there a website as well?
Yeah, if you go to, oh goodness, sorry, I should know this.
That's okay.
There's so many.
You know what? If you want, you can email me the link and I'll put it in the show description.
Okay, I'll do that because I can't recall right now the name of the app that you can go to. There's so many of them.
Yeah. Well, Derek Johnson, it has been a profound honor and a pleasure to reconnect with you. I thank you so much for sharing what is alive within you. It's really beautiful, and I'm honored that you were able to be here and share this. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks for thinking of me. And yeah, anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we're going to have an awkward ending, and hopefully, you know, I hope that one day you and I can reconnect in person. So hopefully that'll happen when things change. So, all right. Please stay healthy and safe. And I'm looking forward to talking with you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.